Kimia, could you
Okay.
give the
Yeah,
Jamp?
I have the ability to share my screen. I'm
Okay,
good.
fine. Perfect.
Okay, so I believe that my partner should be coming soon. So do you mind if we wait for her?
Yeah, no problem. So someone asked, is this expected to run about an hour? So since it's a Q&A panel, it's going to last slightly longer than an hour. We're going to have breakout rooms towards the end of the meeting to give you guys more personal Q&A opportunities with the med students. So majority of it should be done within an hour, but if you want to stay and ask extra questions and join in breakout rooms, then you might want to stay about till 8:30, I would say. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I cannot share my screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
All right, we'll fix that.
You should be able to share your screen now.
All right. Okay, hopefully you can see this, but hi everyone. I am Christy Tran. I am a Jamp ambassador, and Abby, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Abby. I am the other Jamp ambassador.
So we're going to talk to y'all about what Jamp is, and this program is a pre-medical program, and it's oriented towards freshmen. So that's who we're targeting here during this meeting. So we are ambassadors for the Joint Admission Medical Program. And what is Jamp? So Jamp is a program that is made by the state of Texas. So we are here to support and encourage highly qualified and economically disadvantaged Texas residents who are pre-medical students. And because we are funded by the state of Texas, we are required to do certain things at certain deadlines. And we are partnered with 11 Texas medical schools and 70 public and private four-year undergraduate institutions. Okay, so what are the benefits of JAMP? So we give support through scholarships and summer stipends. And we also provide 2 summer internships after your sophomore year and after your junior year, if you get in. And through these internships, you get hands-on experience through clinical opportunities and shadowing. And we also provide Mcat preparation, and you are required to take it at a certain time, usually the spring of your junior year. And we also provide mentoring. And here's the kicker: guaranteed admission into any medical school in Texas, as long as you complete all the criteria set by JAMP. And after you attend medical school, you also get scholarships that will help you throughout your 4 years in medical school. All right, so eligibility. So I'm hearing a little echo. Okay, cool. So eligibility, you have to be a Texas resident, and we are targeting freshmen, as I said. And you also have to have SAT and ACT scores over the mean for the state of Texas. And all of this can be found on the JAMP website, and it'll tell you what those scores are and if you're eligible. And you have to have a FAFSA EFC score of up to 8,000. And you have to complete at least 27 hours of undergraduate credit by the time that you apply. You have to have a 3.25 GPA or higher. And in your BCPM GPA, you have to have a 3.25. And you should meet with your JFD, the faculty director for JAMP, at UTD before you apply. And if you do not know who she is, her name is Shirley Anderson. She is one of the HPAC advisors. So if you are interested in applying for JAMP, I really recommend that you talk to her and meet with her and just show your interest and get to know her, and she can get to know you.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what that timeline is going to look like for Jamp. I know that was a lot of information thrown at you pretty quickly, so hopefully this kind of overview will help anyone who might still be a little unsure. So you're a freshman right now, you're interested in this program that can guarantee you admission into a Texas medical school. Amazing. What should you be doing during your first year? Well, first of all, you should just kind of get yourself exposed to, the medical field if you can. I know during COVID, it's been really hard, but, doing things like virtual shadowing, finding different kind of volunteer opportunities you can do and coming to meetings like this, being involved in some clubs are all great things to be doing, your first year. From that, like Christy had mentioned, you're going to want to contact the JFD, and her name is Miss Anderson. If you still don't know who that is, you can just go to the UTD HPAC office and you'll find her information there and contact her. Once you get in contact with her, just kind of tell her that you're interested in the program, you want to learn some more about it. She might direct you to us. And of course, you guys are free to reach out to us at any time. We'll give our information at the end and start talking to her. Now, during the summer of after your freshman year, you'll start working on the application, applying. It's pretty similar to the application you'll do for medical school. So even if you don't get it, it's a great opportunity to get some exposure of kind of what that's going to look like in a few years too. But you're going to be required to write 3 different essays, give a little background on yourself, and also just include the things that you've been involved in. And then during your freshman or your spring semester of your sophomore year, that's the time that you'll submit your application. And at that point, if you make it through the application round, you'll get an interview around December, January time, and then find out the fall semester of your sophomore year if you have been admitted into the program. So let's say that you get to that part. Why do you even want to be admitted to the program? So like Christy had mentioned, there are tons of things that come along with it. But during your sophomore year, that summer after your sophomore year will be your first internship where you'll get paired with a medical school from Texas, and you'll get to spend around 5 weeks there, getting to take classes that medical students take, getting some amazing opportunities to shadow different physicians and professions, and just getting to meet some amazing people. There are around 100 Jampers in Texas, so you just get that great community with it as well. Then your third year, of course, junior year, everyone's hated year, even as a non-Jamper, is the year that you usually are studying for your Mcat. So that year, you're pretty much going to bunker down and do Mcat prep. Like Christy mentioned, the best thing about Jamp, honestly, or one of the best, there's so many, is that you get the Mcat prep. So during your fall and spring semester, you'll be taking the Kaplan course with an instructor specific to Jamp, and they'll kind of lead you up to that. You'll take your Mcat, and if you do well on your Mcat, you'll move on to your second internship, which will be with another medical school. And then at that point, you'll submit your application for medical school. You'll interview with all 11 medical schools during the beginning of your senior year, and then of course, you'll get acceptance around October, and then you get to just enjoy your senior year. It's a great time. Christy and I can both attest to that. And if you don't do too well on your Mcat, that's okay. As long as you make above a certain threshold, they do give you a second opportunity, and that's where you have the potential of being a round twoer. You'll get to try to retake it again, and if you do make the requirements second time, you'll get to interview, do the same thing, find out around February on where you're going to medical school. But that's kind of everything that Jamp entails. I don't know, Christy, is there anything you want to add?
Like she said, we provide a lot of support. We have 100 Jampers in our program for every year. The HPAC advisors and the JFD is super helpful in your journey. So yeah, it's a really good time being a Jamp, and I really encourage that if you are a freshman, you are highly qualified, and you are economically disadvantaged, that you learn more about this program if you are interested, and we are always here if you want to ask any questions.
Yeah, and I did see a question in the chat about who the program was for, and you can just skip ahead to the contact information. That's just pretty much what I went over. Okay, cool. But yeah, the program is just for freshmen. I'm pretty sure that if you also know someone coming in from high school, there's a thing that you can do that to contact Miss Anderson and get some more information. But yeah, if you're already through your sophomore year, you can no longer apply, but don't worry, you can still get into med school. This is not an ultimatum.
All right, so this QR code right here is a form that we would like you to fill out if you are a freshman and you're interested in joining our Microsoft Teams for Jamp, where you can attend our monthly meetings and learn more about Jamp and be interactive with us. So here are our emails if you have any questions. And yeah. I will also send it into the chat as well. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. If you guys have any more questions, of course, feel free to reach out to their emails as well as the link that they're going to put in the chat. And of course, you can email us and we'll redirect you to them. Okay, we're going to continue with the general meeting. Fatima, do you want to try again? Okay, there we go.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we can. We can go to the first slide.
Wow.
All right, so we have a couple of volunteering updates, and I know we have a lot, especially on the next slide. We're just going to try and make this brief. One of the volunteering updates or volunteer opportunities that we really want to stress is this Catholic Charities opportunity. So Catholic Charities Dallas is an organization, and especially because of the whole COVID situation going on right now, they have a financial assistance program where they help low-income residents in Dallas County basically get set up with a case manager to help get the financial assistance that they need. And volunteers can actually help out at this program by basically calling these clients for about 10 to 15 minutes and setting up a time for an appointment where they can actually meet with the case manager and get that financial assistance. So it's really a great opportunity. We're going to give 2 MD points per hour, and it's entirely virtual as well. We couldn't fit the Google link right here. There's a lot of information on the next slide as well. But on our last email, we do have the Google form link, and on the upcoming next weekly email, we'll also include the link as well. And the next slide has a lot. So don't get overwhelmed, but I'm going to do my best to explain it. So we do have a lot of remote and virtual events, as well as in-person events. Just a quick disclaimer, same as last time, for in-person events, we really can't coordinate these. We're just simply providing this we're just mentioning this information and providing this information to y'all if you want to participate. Remember the priority, COVID is still going on, so stay safe, your health is priority. But this is just for your information. So real quick, just to get started, the remote and virtual events, we still have Reading Partners North Texas, where volunteers hold these weekly sessions, and they really help students who are struggling with reading at their grade level. And these weekly sessions are only about 1 hour, 1.5 hours. There's very short training involved in the very beginning as well. We'll be providing 2 MD points per session and 1 MD point for every hour of training. So really, it is a great opportunity. Virtual shadowing, I know many students have already taken advantage of this opportunity. But just to mention again, there's also the pre-med scene and virtual shadowing YouTube channels that you can follow for weekly recorded Zoom videos. And really, it's a great opportunity to actually experience the medical field and healthcare through the eyes of different physicians in different specialties. So really, it's a great opportunity that you can take advantage of during this virtual setting. And then lastly, we also have Adopt a Senior campaign, which is an upcoming event. It's actually going to be a joint effort between Molding Doctors and Texas COVID Connect organization here at UT Dallas. Adopt a Senior campaign, basically volunteers are going to be working with seniors in different retirement homes, and we're going to be trying getting them as much information and timely updates about the COVID situation, as well as providing them access to information about signing up for a COVID vaccine. So really, it's a great opportunity, and we hope to have it actually up and running by around next week or the week after. There is an interest form, and we'll link it in our next week's email. So stay tuned for that. Now, for the in-person events, we have Incredible Fridays at McKinney, where volunteers actually work with children with special needs and their families for one evening every Friday or every month on, I think, the second Friday of every month. And it's a really fun opportunity because you just spend 4 hours just playing games and having different events at this location. We have Agape Clinic, which is a clinical volunteering opportunity where you basically volunteer at Pre-Clinic in Dallas. Agape offers a lot of clinical opportunities. People can actually take, or volunteers can actually learn, I guess, how the pharmacy works and help restocking pharmacy. On top of that, they also get to do vitals and practice their clinical skills on incoming patients as well. So it's also a great opportunity. They're also looking for Spanish translators. So if anyone is can speak Spanish, that's definitely something that they're looking for. Acing Autism is actually a volunteer opportunity in person on campus here at UT Dallas. They're actually at the tennis courts here at UTD. And volunteers really teach the game of tennis to children with autism and help them develop social skills and build more social connections. So that's another great opportunity as well. And lastly, North Texas Food Bank has several volunteer opportunities, basically trying to fight against food insecurity. It's really a great way to help out our community. All the links to the websites are going to be mentioned here on the slide. And of course, in our next weekly email, we'll include them as well. But those are all the volunteer opportunities that we have. If any of these interest you, please feel free to actually visit their websites, read up more on their information and their mission. And yeah, volunteer. It's a great way to give back to our community.
All right, so we're going to be doing something a little new this year. We're having a virtual art competition, and so the rules are stated below. You want to submit your artwork by emailing us at our email, or you can DM any one of us on GroupMe. When you do that, you also want to show what theme that you're portraying, and the themes are also listed above right here. These themes are rather vague, I will admit, and you can interpret them in any way you can. We would prefer your artwork be in like, no, your artwork can be anything you want, paintings, drawings, etc. There will be a winner for each theme. So yeah, again, make sure you tell us what theme you're doing when you submit your artwork, and yeah, well, you'll receive a prize as well as any recognition at our end of the year banquet, which we'll mention later in the presentation. And you will also have your artwork posted on our Instagram. Shri, did you want to add anything else, or are we okay?
No, that's it. Just remember there's going to be a winner of each theme. And yeah, send in your artwork. You can email to us, you can DM us on GroupMe or Instagram. And of course, we'll recognize you at the banquet as well as, social media. But yeah, so we'd really like to see, the artistic abilities of anyone who wants to take a shot. All right, so we're gonna talk about, SANIC, MD elections, and the MD banquet before we get into the panel. So SANIC, which stands for Simulated Admissions and Normalized Interview Center. Basically, it's our biggest event, and we give you the opportunity to conduct or undergo mock medical school interviews that is conducted by our faculty members. And of course, leading up to this, we always host a variety of workshops that will help you directly for your interviews, as well as your personal statement and other useful medical school application process. So of course, all of this information has already been sent in the email that was sent out yesterday. This will also be available on our link tree as well as our website. So if you want to participate in the interviews, especially, you will need to fill out the application and send it to us by the deadline, which is April 2nd, I believe. The deadline is in the email. And, but of course, regardless if you apply or not, everyone is welcome to join us in these workshops. It's going to be from April 5th to April 9th. It's going to be Monday through Friday, and most likely every night around 7 p.m. So not entirely sure if these are going to be recorded yet, but please try to make sure if you can attend in person so you can get the most out of it. So we have a question. Someone's asking, are the mock interviews only for juniors and seniors? So while it is beneficial for juniors and seniors, because they're the ones who are most likely applying that cycle, everyone can join, freshmen and sophomores. In the past, we've actually had majority of lower class join us, and they really benefit from learning this process early on. and keeping that in mind while they continue with the rest of their undergrad journey. But yeah, great question. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to email us and we'll answer them for you. All right, so of course, we're reaching the end of the year. So MD elections are gonna start on April 5th. So that's also the day SANIC starts. And then we are going to close the application when SANIC ends on the second week, which is April 18th on that Sunday. So just like last year, because everything's virtual because of COVID, you will have to fill out the application that we'll send, as well as record a 2-minute officer speech, telling a little bit about yourself and the position you're applying for. And as well as like last year, we'll compile these videos, post it on our website, and then members will be able to view them and make a decision on who they want to elect. I believe we'll have to do this through, I forgot the website, but through the SOC website. And members, you'll have from April 21st to April 27th, so about a week. And then the following day right after is going to be the MD Banquet. So we won't announce the winners until the end of the MD Banquet. So if you're applying and if you're a member who's interested in the results, you want to attend the banquet so you can hear the results. And yeah, so all of this and more information we'll give you guys in the coming weeks. So look out for our emails as well as social media and our website. And as usual, if you have any questions about how the process works, as well as what a specific role does, if you're interested in that role, just feel free to DM us or email us and we'll answer those questions. And then lastly, the final event of this semester and this year for 2020 to 2021 is going to be our virtual banquet. This is something we didn't get the chance to do last year, but we did it for the first time 2 years ago in person. Now we're doing this again virtually. So it's going to be April 28th, 7 p.m. Most likely going to last about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And of course, we're going to give out lots of awards like top 10 MD member points, as well as superlative awards, recognizing our wonderful mentors and mentees this year. And then our competition winners will be announced and we'll showcase all the submissions. And of course, the main event, we're going to announce the officer election winners. So please make sure to join us for this end of the year event. All right, so that was all of our announcements. We're going to get started with our medical student panel. We have 5 guest speakers today. We have Brooklyn Palmer from UT Southwestern. She's a MS2. Amar, also a previous MD president from UTD. He is also at UT Southwestern, MS2. Navina is also a former UTD president about 5 years ago. It's been a while, but she's also at UT Southwestern, but she's at the end of her medical school journey. She's at MS4. And Mayu, she's at Dell. She's MS2. Kimberly Tran, also a former MD vice president. She's at TCOM, and she is our one and only DO med student, but I'm sure she can handle it very well. All right, so med students, if you want to unmute and show yourself, or feel free to however you want to present yourself, and we'll get started with questions.
Hi guys, I hope everyone's doing well.
Hey everyone.
All right. Fatima, do you want to get started with the questions? All right, so keep in mind there's 4 main questions and you guys can talk about it in as much detail as you want. And members, if you have any questions based on their responses, feel free to ask them. All right, so the first question is, what is something that surprised you in medical school and do you have a least or favorite thing about it?
I can answer this one if no one else wants to go. But I guess how important it is to work smart rather than work hard in medical school, like that really dawned on me because you have like so much information to shove into your brain. It's like the people who get like the highest grades and who perform the best are the people who know like what not to memorize versus what to memorize, you know? So it's like how you really optimize your time and make yourself as efficient as possible. I feel like those are the variables that really matter. And those are the variables that determine, you know, how successful you will be in medical school.
I would say something that surprised me about med school is just how unique every one of my classmates is. Just the number of experiences they have, and you know the different unique backgrounds they come from. I think I really learned a lot from my classmates and the things that they were able to bring. And it's also part of my favorite part of med school is just being able to learn from different perspectives and enjoying that.
Yeah, so one thing that surprised me about med school was, I think, well, I knew it would be kind of difficult, but I think the volume of information came at me really fast, and like the expectation that we would learn it, because I remember getting our first like set of material and I looked at it and I was like, you're kidding, right? You're kidding, right? Are you kidding? So I think one thing that surprised me was not only how much work it actually was, but how you get used to it. Like it doesn't really get easier. You just kind of get used to learning like that and trying to always tweak your technique and being more efficient with it.
All right, thank you guys. So Mayus will actually not be able to attend, and Brooklyn will be joining us at 7:30. And Irene asked a question that directly relates to the next question. So if you guys want to save your answers till then. So we can go to the second question. So what does your typical day look like? And if you want to combine that with Irene's question, feel free. And I know you guys are at different years. Two of you are at the same school. So, and one of you is at TCOM. So if you guys want to compare and contrast that, go ahead.
I can say what a fourth year's kind of typical day looks like. It really depends on if it's like pre-match and post-match day. Like post-match day, like we're pretty much chilling, and we have these like random courses called like residency essentials that prep you for residency. But besides that, it's like pretty much we're free for the rest of the day. So there is like a light at the end of the tunnel. Like fourth year, you're like really chilling. But third year is probably the most difficult year. It was for me, and I think for most people, because you really get into your like clinical clerkships during that year. But I think the other two MS2s can really talk about how MS2 year is and how pre-clerkships are. But I mean, fourth year, you're just chilling.
Yeah, I would say for the pre-clerkship routine, I think it's similar to undergrad in ways that, you know, we have a few hours of classes in the mornings, and then most afternoons we also have some classes, and then the rest of the time is, you know, just spent prepping for exams and whatever you have coming up. Trying to address the question in the chat specifically, like comparing it to, you know, undergrad. I would say that, you know, med school in a way that there is more information. So I think you can't get away with just cramming, you know, the night before the test like you did in undergrad for some courses. I think it's definitely more of a, you have to be disciplined and manage your time well, so that way you aren't leaving everything last minute. But I think if you are able to manage your time well, there's still plenty of time for hobbies and personal time. And I think honestly, that's something that you have to kind of figure out on your own, trying to find that balance. And I mean, it might be hard at first, but it's something that we all get used to.
So I don't know what med school looks like without COVID. So I think being in my first year, starting school in a pandemic, a lot of times we have pre-recorded lectures. So there's a lot more flexibility in how we want to study, when we want to study, and so forth. I think the only difference in obligation that we have to be at school is for our osteopathic manipulative medicine lab, which is something that we learn as DO students. So aside from that required block or class time, it's really flexible, like Amar mentioned. So you can really tailor it to your study needs as well as your hobbies and the things you enjoy.
I think there was a question in the chat about if you have time for hobbies and personal time. I mean, it really depends on the medical student, but for me, wellness is like a really big thing for me. Like I can't, go on with, all the stress of medical school if I don't have something like a hobby to fall back on. And something that I did in undergrad was photography. And I was kind of surprised by how much I could do photography even in medical school and how I really prioritized the time. And I had, it was possible for me to fit in that hobby into my schedule. And regarding a job, it's very hard to have a part-time or even definitely not a full-time job, but even a part-time job in medical school. I would say maybe fourth year you can try. As far as a job for me, I was a professional photographer on the side, but it was very a flexible schedule according to what times I was available. There are, depending on what medical school you get into, there are opportunities for university jobs or jobs on the medical school, for example, in the gym and et cetera, or in the library. So it really depends on where you go. But for the most part, it's hard to have a job that requires other responsibilities outside of medical school.
All right. So keep asking questions in the chat. We'll try to answer those after these 4 questions. So the third question is, how has COVID affected your this year particularly? And do you think that will impact the rest of your experience at med school, or how future med students view or their experience in med school, if there's any effect regarding to MD or COVID, sorry. Fatima, do you want to go back a slide?
I think Kimberly touched on this a little bit, but in terms of how it affected my year, since I was in the pre-clerkship stuff, most of the lectures are already recorded from last year, so we could watch them, and anything that, any classes that were live were done online, and essentially that didn't change the experience too much, I would say. And then, moving into clerkships, I think, fingers crossed, things have gotten more under control and they're looking to reopen things. So I imagine that by the time, you guys are in med school, there should be a new sense of normalcy by then.
Hi there.
Hi, Brooklyn. We're just getting into the questions. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I was just going to touch base on this a little bit. Also, hello, I'm a second-year medical student with Amar, actually. And I just want to touch on, I feel like one of the biggest cons of COVID in medical school is taking away a lot of in-person, patient interaction, like clinical skills. And hopefully someone did answer this already, but kind of depending on your personality, you might want to consider maybe going a little bit out of your way to maybe practicing some of those skills if you find that they are particularly harder for you to do that, and that is going to vary person by person. I think a benefit of it is that a lot of the transit time going to campus, you're saving a lot of time at the end of the day, especially when you think about if you bring your food or get food at a cafeteria. So I think that, if you are efficient with your time, in theory, you can have more time in the world of COVID. But on the flip side, there's naturally going to be less clinical experiences. So you might hopefully your school supplements them. I think it's all kind of we're learning how this looks in the field. And so you might have to take a little bit of initiative depending on what your comfort level is with those clinical skills.
Kimberly, did you have something?
Yeah, so to go off of that, I think one of the things that's required for our school during first year is anatomy lab. So I know that our experience in anatomy lab has definitely been cut a little bit. And I think they did reduce the time we're allowed to be in there, this time that they set aside for us to study in there. And not only that, we just have less students per tank. So I can't really speak to what it would look like before that, but I know that every school has tried to make modifications to facilitate and encourage student learning, even in the midst of the pandemic.
All right, if anyone has anything else, we'll go to the next question. So lastly, how do you wind down after an exam of studying for long periods of time? And what do you do for fun? I think we kind of touched base on that, but if anyone else wants to expand on this.
Yeah, since I wasn't here before, I guess I will talk a little bit. I apologize, my cat is so needy. I just wanted to say something that took me a while to learn is to make sure like that you are painfully in tune with how you unwind. And like that might not be the same as your peers. And that's really, really important. And that's something that took me like an embarrassing time to realize. So you need to really just be in tune, like what makes you in particular feel energized. And maybe if it's not what some of your peers do, you never know, someone else might be out there. And so like time is so precious, especially in medical school, and especially when you're trying to recover by something intense. And so if you're not intentional about how you in particular unwind, like maybe for some friends that's going out and drinking, maybe for you that is being home and like nurturing yourself and sleeping, you know what I mean? Everything is valid. And the idea that peer pressure is gone post-college is like completely not true. And so just make sure you're really intentional. I just think that you will feel so much more fulfilled. And kind of tapping onto this one and kind of the free time, understanding that the things that give you joy will give you the energy to get through some of the harder things. I personally didn't get really serious into fitness until medical school. And no joke, I remember the first few months of medical school were really, really hard on my mental health. And I started really giving into those natural endorphins and I could study longer. You know what I mean? So many of my other things I enjoyed more. So I think it's easy to think, oh, this will take time. I don't have time for it. But to understand that it's more complicated than that. And that, yes, it might take objective time out of your day, but if it's going to give you the energy and, you know, the mentality to push through some of the other things, it might definitely be worth it. So I think that's kind of something that's easy to kind of fall into. But once you find what gives you energy to put you through some of the things that are just objectively hard, it's just a total game changer.
Yeah, excuse me, I can speak to that a little bit more too. I think it's important, kind of like you mentioned, Brooke, to set boundaries. And that's not only like after you study for an exam, but I think even the day-to-day, if you can set those boundaries and you can, because I think in med school, there's just so much to do that sometimes it's really easy to neglect self-care. So I know for me, I set a certain time, and after that time, no matter how much I've done, I'm not going to study after that because I need my rest and I need to wake up and do it all over again the next day. So just really realizing your own limits and realizing the things that you need to do in order to sustain is really important, and to set those boundaries and to never like sideline your own care.
All right, thank you guys for your responses. So since it's actually a smaller crowd, we're just going to stay in the main room and answer some of these questions. Fatima, if you want to go to the next slide. So we have, and then next slide, please. So we prepared some smaller questions, but first let's get to the ones in the chat, and anyone wants to take a shot, they can. So I believe this was already answered. So what upper level bio-electives would you recommend that med students or pre-med students take in preparation for med school?
Anatomy and physiology for sure. AMP. I think that was one of the highest yield. Also, if you're a neuro major, neuropharmacology, that class, it was so annoying to study for, but it really helped me out. And then biochem helps out as well. I think those are like my top three: AMP, biochem. I don't think 2 is necessary. biochem 1 for sure, and then neuro and neuropharmacology.
As someone who did not take A&P, I concur. I really wish I did. Like, that is just such a foundation. I like knew an embarrassing little amount of things, and like, yes, you'll get through it. And I mean, I did like realize I had a knack for it, but I do remember thinking, man, I wish I took this in undergrad. So just to back that up.
Okay. So do you have time for a job?
So for this, yeah, so basically kind of that was touched on, if you do have a job, like it needs to be completely flexible. Like you can't, for the most part, I mean, I'm sure people have defined this, right? You can't have a job for the most part that's going to be super, super strict. Maybe like weekend stuff. I mean, I think it's arguable to say that there are some parents in medical school, and I feel like that's a job, obviously a little more different in terms of priorities, but I know I do some things on the side, but they're completely on my own time. And I know some friends who tutor, and again, I'm sure they probably work with those students to fit their specific schedule. So there, you'll notice kind of like a trend. So if you do have a job, it's not going to be the most traditional one, and something like tutoring is probably going to be the most feasible. But even then, if you're with a company, you might have X hours a week. So if you can find a way to maybe like private tutor or like network in that way, that's probably your best bet if you want to get a job.
My roommate actually, she for the pre-clerkship part of medical school, where your schedule is kind of like a little bit more normal. You know, you don't have to go to the hospital at the crack of dawn. She was actually a fitness instructor, and she taught 2 classes a week. And that was kind of also like her like wellness activity for the week as well. So it was like a win-win situation. So you can look into that maybe.
Okay. So Apurva is asking, if you could redo undergrad, what would you have done differently from the knowledge you have now?
I think I definitely would have tried to work harder to build better habits. I think we've touched on wellness quite a bit, and I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's definitely really important. And I wish that's something that I learned in undergrad, and learn to prioritize my own wellness, like sleep, diet, exercise, and also learn to say no to things, because there's a million different opportunities out there. But realizing what's most meaningful to you is often harder than just saying yes and going with the flow. So I wish those are some things that I had recognized earlier.
Yeah, I concur. Building especially like mental health habits, you'll find that a lot of things are really hard to do when you're in the thick of it. Like it just so many things, and it's tricky, right? Because it's like when you're in the thick of it is when you feel like you need it most, but then when you aren't in it is when you actually have the time to prioritize it. So really those mental habit investments to start now, like I'm sure all of us can promise that you will thank yourself later. I also wish I did a bit more quality over quantity. I think that's a pressure that a lot of pre-meds have. I still feel like overall I balanced it, but like looking back, I think for me personally, I had done so much quantity that I feel like I didn't always get those quality relationships out of things because I was so go, go, go. And again, it's like those people that you meet in college could be your lifelong friends. They could not too, but don't, make sure you're taking a step back and, seeing like, what are my goals in life? Am I acting in that way? Because it's really easy to lose sight when you're trying to put a lot of different things in an application.
I think for me, one of the things, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Is like being comfortable with not knowing things and being comfortable with asking questions. Like that's something where like when you get into medical school, you're going to be with like really smart people. You're not going to be the smartest person in the room. So it's just, it's a really humbling experience, but it's also like very important to get comfortable with that really quickly and not let that bring you down. Instead, understand it's a learning environment and you're absorbing information from everyone around you. So it's really good to get comfortable with that, early on.
Thank you. So Apurva, sorry, not Apurva. Irene's asking, how is the financial situation for med school? I'm aware of loans and a few other scholarships, but is there any other options?
I mean, it's pretty rough, I'm not gonna lie. And I think what also is rough is when you have a bunch of peers whose like parents pay for everything and you're like, wait a second, you aren't stressing out about this. And so I think that's something that's not talked about, right? Because it's a bit taboo, because it's no one's fault, right? But at the same time, it can make things kind of awkward when you have friends who are like, oh, like, let's go out to brunch and all this other stuff. And you're like, actually, I need to save money for rent. And so if you ever find yourself in the position, like, you're definitely not alone. That was me. Kind of like we mentioned, if you can find some side jobs, which maybe those are something you do earlier on, or look into early on. Again, like, you could start those tutoring relationships now, maybe when you have more time, and then later on you can be more flexible with your schedule. But you are gonna want to really plan. Like, I gotta keep it real. There was 1 month where I like put rent on a credit card because that's how broke I was. So like, it can get rough out here. And so you really want to just be smart. And again, it's like, you should find people who aren't going to, who are fine if you like do your meal prep brunch at home and then meet up with them later, you know what I mean? And so again, maybe that's a theme for me because I just felt like it wasn't talked about enough for me, but it's like, just because people around you doing certain things, like, you have to be intentional. You're probably intentional with this whole process. And also, it's super easy to jump on a lot of these really expensive resources early on. Don't do that. Don't do that. Make sure you're asking upper years, y'all. Say it with me, like, you're asking upperclassmen what resources you need and don't need, because those, obviously, at the end of the day, a lot of those are hundreds of dollars, right? So really ask upperclassmen, see if you can look into a job. Shouldn't be the biggest pressure, at the end of the day, like, that could really take away from your experience. So be careful. But just understand that if you aren't in a situation where you have like a bunch saved up or something like that, you're just going to need to be really intentional. But again, if you got to medical school, you probably have those skills. You might just need to put them in a, financial direction, and honestly start saving as soon as you can. Like, if you have time now in the summers to work, save now. But also, I mean, if you have like a gap year or something, still enjoy it, but you just be intentional, basically. And long story short, it can get rough, not to scare anyone, but just to prepare y'all,
To go off of that, I think being prepared is really important. I think there's kind of like the expectation that it's going to be expensive, which it is. And you should also look into like the various programs to see how much they cost, private schools versus public school programs. Like, I know in Texas, there's a lot of public schools that get funding for that. So maybe that's a little cheaper than going out of state. So I think just the preparedness and the research into what your options are. And secondly, Brooke, you mentioned gap year. So I actually worked during my time at UTD, and I worked a gap year that was in the healthcare field. So it was very helpful in terms of experience. But I think saving from those experiences is helping me now. I know it's probably not going to pay for the full med school education, but it definitely puts my mind at ease a little bit more to negate some of the cost. So if you have a gap year, I would definitely recommend maybe getting a job in that time, something that is meaningful to you, but also will set you up for success in the future.
All right, thank you. So the next question is regarding Mcat. What Mcat prep course, if you guys did any, and what was your Mcat score, if you'd like to share, and how long did you study for that?
Okay, I don't like silence, so I'll talk. So I got a 509, which like was kind of right on the cusp to me. But I mean, hey, we got here now, so it's okay. I took one of these summer ones that UTD offered. I feel like that was ages ago, so I don't even know the names of them anymore. I did take a course. You definitely don't need to, but again, kind of like the financial thing is that you need to be prepared to be painfully organized if you're not going to take a course. Just a couple of things on the MCAT though. While I feel like my score was like, my biggest fault was on cars. And so definitely do time cars, y'all. I did not do time cars. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever did. Do time cars. And when you take the practice test, make sure that you are starting at the time you're going to start it and take the full thing. When I heard people weren't taking the full thing, you're only hurting yourself. And just understand that the test in and of itself is a part of the experience, not just the material. And so you really want to set yourself up, because that momentum that you need for such a length test, you need to practice that momentum. You're not just going to get it on the day. So those are just some like general MCAT thoughts.
Just to add to that, I would say like there are a lot of online resources like Khan Academy, I would say, that are just as valuable. I ended up taking a Princeton Review online course, but honestly, I found that just like the online material that I found was just as helpful. So I don't think there's any need to necessarily spend a lot of money on MCAT resources. I would say that, yeah, like it depends on your background and how comfortable you are with the material. You might need more help versus less. And so again, it depends on your situation, but I would recommend, if you can, look at resources that, like the Khan Academy online resources, or even just like practice tests that you can find. The AMC material, that was also really helpful for me. And so I don't think you necessarily have to spend a lot of money to do well in the MCAT. And I think that if you're diligent about your preparation and, again, talk to your upperclassmen and people who've taken it and see what they have to say about it, but you can still do well.
All right, thank you. So Shreyas is asking, how has your perspective on medicine changed through undergrad and med school? Might be a while to think on that. Any eye openers?
I mean, I can talk. I just don't like being that person who's like the only one talking, but I will talk if I need to talk. So for me personally, I've only done one kind of elective rotation type deal. But I guess in terms of how it's changed, I've really just become aware of how like procedure and intervention things are prioritized versus actual outcomes for patients, which personally for me has made me want to look towards primary care, because I feel like there's more opportunities to educate. And for the record, I'm also doing my MPH because I just think that there's so much information in the public health sphere that is so applicable to practitioners that is not being taught. And another thing too, I mean, just in general, and I think a lot of situations in this past year has brought this to light, is that, any kind of preconceived notions that general public have, like people in healthcare have too. And I think it's really important to not put people on a pedestal, and like we need to acknowledge, our own faults and our own, tunnel vision. And so just understanding how valuable letting go of ego and humility is in our field in order for the betterment of our patients in the community. So those are just a couple of thoughts. And then I don't know if there's intros, but yeah, I'm doing my MPH and I took a gap year. So if that applies to anyone, I also didn't do a lot of traditional things. I kind of did my own thing. So if people have questions on that, I know my email's being sent out, but just a little more about me.
I think you get a little more jaded, and that's just like, I'm not sugarcoating it at all. Like you do get a lot more jaded as medical school progresses. Like when I was in my first like ICU rotation earlier in my fourth year, like two of my patients that I was taking care of, like they died, and one of them died while I was like giving her compressions. So like those kind of situations like really change your perspective about like life and death. And like the nurses that I was with, the doctors that I were with, like they weren't as impacted by it. So it, if it's your first time, you'll definitely be impacted by it. But like those two experiences really kind of showed me how important it is to, take time to really focus on mental health and how important those like, winding down activities are, like something that you can fall back on to, de-stress from whatever is, going on in the day-to-day life, especially when you're like in the hospital and you're doing like things clinically and you're seeing patients and you're seeing poor outcomes and not everything that you're doing is actually helping the patient. So I feel like getting a head start on, focusing on mental health and being, self-aware is really, really important. And I feel like it's especially important, especially if you're in the medical field.
So kind of going off of that, how much is ethics talked about or taught in different years, if any at all?
I actually, so it's like a volunteer basis. Like if students want to get more experience in ethics, they have the option. So there are specific electives there are optional electives that students can take. I actually took one of them in my first year, which really did change my perspective about certain things. We went through a lot of like really interesting cases, but I feel like until you're in the hospital and you're seeing things in front of you that that really like make you like scratch your head about like, okay, like what do we do in this situation versus that situation? It's kind of really subjective. I've only had maybe like one or two situations where we've actually had to like consult the ethics committee of the hospital. But I feel like once you're like in your third and fourth year, you really get into the nitty gritty of, different situations, especially when you're working in the ICU and really like high stress areas where patients are like dying left and right.
Was there?
So
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, I think it really varies from school to school because here at TCOM, ethics is a required part of our classes. So I think it really just depends on like what school you go to. And at first we kind of all like moan and groan about it because it's like, oh, another 3-hour ethics class. But after being in it, I think you start to really see the importance of it. Like Naveen, you mentioned that ethics board at the hospital. So I remember last week we had to do this thing where we all pretended to be a different member on that ethics board, and we had a certain thing that we tried to advocate for. And it was weird at first because it felt like we were like role playing and like reading this script. But then after a while and really getting into it, you kind of realize how complicated it is, and then how important it is. Just to start thinking about these things ahead of time. So yeah.
So I was gonna go back to Navina. Could you, you went through rotations. So out of those rotations, was there any particular one that you felt, really pushed? And in terms of like, this is getting real, that feeling?
Oh yeah. So I was at Parkland 17 West for my psychiatry rotation. And if you know anything about Parkland, 17 West is where they put like the most notorious psych patients. And the ones that like were brought in by the police, like that are violent, that attack the staff every day, like those patients. And so the rotation was really exciting. But I had to do like a project on one of my patients. Like I had to basically follow one of the patients that I was taking care of throughout the entirety of that rotation. And then at the end of the day, I had to do this like paper on that patient. And so the patient that I was working with had THC-induced schizophrenia, and he also had like a component of bipolar disorder as well. But he was a very erratic patient, and I became friends with this patient. Okay, so I had to like speak to him around an hour or so every single day. I became friends with this patient, but also there was like I also had to like maintain, that professional boundary and everything. But I also developed a really good rapport with the patient. But at the same time, patient is the patient, doctor is the doctor, and there are, you can't he's not your buddy, right? You have to like make sure that the patient knows that you're the doctor when you enter the room, pretty much. So basically, I was like very casual with this patient, and then later on, since like I kind of forgot the fact that this is a psych patient, he is very erratic, and certain things, there are inconsistencies in his behavior at certain times. And towards the end of the rotation, this patient started developing paranoia about me. Like he thought that I was some sort of imposter. And the fact that I was like entering his room every single day and asking him a bunch of questions, like he was like really suspicious about me. And then later at the end, he just like totally like, he had this like talk with my attending, like saying that I don't like this girl, why'd she keep entering my room, and basically like thrashed me in front of the attending. And at that time, it was just like, okay, yeah, I need to know better, like what the boundary is, you know, how I maintain that professional relationship with my patients. And also I shouldn't take everything that patients tell me to heart, because that's a huge burden to carry every time you go back home. So I think that shit really got real at that time for me.
All right, well, thank you for sharing. All right, so next question, Mahir says, I was wondering how many leadership positions are needed to stand out? I'm guessing in undergrad.
I think it's really quality over quantity that matters.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I'd say that also you don't have to have necessarily like a formal like leadership position. There's leadership in many different ways. Like, you know, even if you're volunteering, you can take leadership in the action that you're doing and inspire others. So look for that and don't necessarily chase after a checkbox of saying that I need this many leadership positions. Look to see if you can be a leader in your community in other ways.
Yeah, and just to add to that, definitely know if someone tells you a specific number, they're not right. That's just the truth, because I'm sure we all have different numbers. And then also, I think it's underrated leadership in, you know, non-medical related things. Because at the end of the day, you're very limited of what you can do in medicine as an undergrad, and there's so much you can do in other realms. And I found that like a lot of my interview questions, like nothing that had to do with medicine. There are other leadership positions that I did. But yeah, no, if you have like 3 in some clubs, or you're not actually taking initiative but have your name on the officer board, versus 1 or 2 in one, you have like, you start up a whole program that like does community outreach and all this other stuff. Like I promise you, every single interviewer, like that's going to be a lot more intriguing, because they've seen people with titles. Titles don't mean much. Like how can you write an entire essay over what you did in that position? Like, you know, obviously you're not going to, but kind of like, do you even have enough quantity? You know, enough information of what you've done, because it was so impactful as like growing as a human and to that org or the community. Like that's definitely what matters.
Okay. So next question, Apurva is saying, if there's anything you could change about the medical school admission process or medical education in general, what would you change?
I mean, I feel like telling what we said, which we wish were different, isn't just as helpful to y'all, because like just because we wish it was different doesn't mean it's helpful. I mean, I definitely, like I said, not having financial support for my family, I wish there wasn't so many prices. Like, do they really need all that money? Like, probably not. But then, wait, what was the other part of the question? Education in general. I personally am very big on nutrition. And one of my things that I'm really involved in is culinary medicine. And so I just wish that that was incorporated in like a realistic way. Like you can throw a 15-minute video at some students, but you know, if you're really intentionally giving them the tools to educate them that is applicable to their patients, that's extremely valuable, because at the end of the day, like we know objectively that food is like the most determining factor to the top causes of death. And so the fact that nutrition would not be a focus just doesn't add up to me. So that's personally what I wish was different. But a lot of schools do offer culinary medicine. So as you're applying, that's something you can look for, and Southwestern has that.
Okay. So Shreyas is asking, what are y'all's long-term goal in medicine and just in the future in general?
So I'm matched into NYU for internal medicine, so I'm going into internal medicine. But thank you. But down the road, I want to do a fellowship, possibly in gastroenterology, but we'll see where it takes me.
For me, I have a developing interest in family medicine because I kind of like the idea of comprehensive care. And like, I like the idea of just being able to advocate for patients as they try to navigate the complicated medical sphere, and being able to care for generations of patients. So while that's still developing, I think those are some of the things that I will want to implement in my practice. And I guess like outside of medicine, I know that I want to like have a family and all of this. So I guess it's just good to find a partner or someone who understands how important medicine is to me. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Kind of going off what some of the panelists earlier mentioned, with public health, in undergrad, I was a business major as well. And so that's something that I look forward to in my future career, looking at, just the business side of medicine and how we can use that to the advantage of patients and making things like more accessible and affordable for patients.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you more about your business degree. All right.
Yeah, and then I'm currently interested in either family medicine or med peds, which is a board certified where you do internal medicine and pediatrics. And then I'm really interested in being incorporated in some kind of free clinic that focuses on food insecurity.
Just for some context, I don't know if everyone knows, but Brooklyn has a nutrition Instagram is doing very good. So if you guys want to check that out, I think it's called Beats by Brooke. If you want to type it in the chat.
Yes. Yeah, so, and that's also like a side note, how I help financially support myself too. But yeah, to me, just to give context, I'm very intentional on my social media. I think that realistically, it is a natural realm of public health because like you need to kind of meet people where they're at, and most people are on social media. So incorporating that in medical wellness education, I think has a lot of potential. And just to kind of rant a bit more on this, some people will say that they think it's like potentially unethical for people in healthcare to be on social media, which I'm really grateful because my mentor, who is a physician at Southwestern, is very pro people in healthcare and social media because at the end of the day, people are going to talk about things, right? And if you can balance that out with people who, have the experience, have the education, because there's a lot of misinformation that like literally every single one of your patient will hear about. And so if you can be up to date and bust those myths, I feel like there's just a lot of potential there. So just to wrap up.
So what are some common medical school interview questions that you guys encountered?
I feel like we should do the uncommon ones because you're going to find the common ones everywhere. Someone asked me what part of a car I would be. That was actually at my Southwestern one, and I think it saved me because my interview was going poorly, and then that one saved me. I won't tell you my answer though, because I don't know, I feel weird about that. But then someone else asked, like, what would I do if I had an extra hour in the day? So I feel like it's good to say the unusual ones because you're going to find the other ones with a Google search.
Anyone else have any unusual interview questions?
Someone asked me, like, if everything was automated in the future, what would patients be missing out on? So, like, if, like, instead of doctors, if it was a robot treating you, like, what would you be missing out on? I thought that was kind of weird. But I was like, I mean, I answered it, like, ethics and all the like soft skills and all that stuff. But, tell me about yourself is a really, really like everyone is going to ask you that. So you need to know your like elevator pitch, like to the T. Like, obviously don't make it sound like it's a canned memorized answer. But if you have this like really solid, short, tell me about yourself answer, you're going to be solid.
I think one that stood out to me was someone asked me like teach them something. I thought that was a fun question to answer. But aside from that, I think a lot of my interviews ended up being pretty conversational in general. Like, there were some of the standard like why medicine or tell me about yourself type of questions just to start off. But then, just being a conversation of like things that you mentioned on your application that the interviewer found interesting and, wanted you to elaborate on. So.
Okay, I guess a follow-up to that is for med school interviews, how creative is too creative?
Don't get political and don't give like really harsh opinions because you don't know who your interviewer is. So you can be really creative, but like there's also a fine line between like creative / like borderline, maybe offensive / maybe political. So, yeah, I wouldn't say any like risque answers to questions.
Hey, Sri, I
And
think you
also-
have a sound going on in the background. Maybe
I
only
think-
I hear.
I think it's Jessica.
Oh, okay.
Jessica, do you mind reading? All right, thank you. All right.
To go off of that, I know that TCOM does multiple mini interviews. So pretty much what you do is you just go and you read a prompt and then you go inside and they give you like 5 minutes to answer it. I think at SANIC there will be something very similar. So that's a good chance to practice if you have not signed up for SANIC already. But I think one of the things to caution about that is you don't want to go in there and just like be super opinionated or super firm on one side, especially if it's like an ethical dilemma. Like you definitely want to be able to consider the other side and show that you are able to have some perspective on what other people think too. So just really finding that balance of being able to articulate what you think and feel, but also to show compassion and understanding in your answers.
Yeah, so I actually have a really good example of that just to put what they said to light. So I worked at Whole Foods during my gap year. I worked in the supplement area, and there's like a bunch of like allopathic medications, right? But when I told interviewers about it, I never was like, oh, like I'm learning about this because I don't believe in it, but patients might, you know what I mean? But I was like, oh, I think it would be really valuable to understand the, the non, structured things that patients take. Y'all, the dean of students at a school took allopathic like medications, or actually, okay, it's not allopathic. I'm saying that wrong. Homeo? No, it's a very specific like brand. But long story short, the dean of students who was interviewing me took them. So if I had come at her with that like super like I don't believe in this, but I'm learning it anyway, which I mean, again, you have to be open-minded. That's a skill you need as a physician. I would have completely ruined my chances. I will say though, on the creative front, I am a proponent of being as creative as possible. And I do think that interviews are my strong suits. I got early acceptance to every school I interviewed at, which I'd say just to say that I think that backs up the interviews are my strong suit. So for the teach me something thing, I taught them a tap dance move. You know what I mean? And so it's like, and I think that really took them aback. Or with the car one, I guess I can told you, I chose the brake. And so versus like the engine or the wheel, I feel like are probably the more common ones. So yeah, so I think when it comes to creative, be as creative as you want, as long as you can back it up, right? You can't just say something crazy and not back it up. But yeah, for the MMIs, there's actually a book. I think it's just called Multi-Mini Interviews. If you have the time, I wouldn't don't stop your whole life for this. I did read it because Dell also has those. And my thought process is like you need to be yourself, but you can always be a slightly more structured version of yourself. So I read that book and like another interview book. And again, like you probably have time over the summer for them anyway. If you don't, it's fine. But I feel like a lot of people who I told read books, they were like, why are you doing that? But I'm like, if you can have a slightly more structured form, like it's only going to help you as long as you just don't overcorrect and make yourself sound robotic.
Thanks for sharing. All right, let's see. I think this is a good one. Are there any misconceptions or expectations you had going into medical school that you learned were wrong or were not met?
I guess there's this huge like misconception regarding someone's like test scores versus how well they perform like clinically, like in the hospital. I mean, there were some people that I knew in my class who like always like topped the class in terms of like test scores and everything. But then when it comes to actually like speaking to a patient or even like working under pressure in like a really high stress situation in the hospital, they kind of like, gonna get stressed out, or they don't know how to like, contain themselves pretty well or like perform well under pressure. So I feel like putting a huge emphasis on whatever Mcat score you got or whatever step score you got, like, that number doesn't define you at all. There are so many amazing medical students and like future physicians and who matched into great programs, not only because of their scores, but mostly because of their recommendation letters and how well they did on their like clerkships and clinically. So I think it's a huge misconception to put so much of like emphasis on like a number.
And then, do you guys have homework at all? If that's even considered homework.
There are some deadlines in medical school, like to finish certain things, but everything is mostly self-paced, which is like a curse and a blessing at the same time, because if it's up to you personally, then it completely depends on how disciplined you are, right? They're just going to be like, show up at the shelf exam at 9 o'clock on the last day of the clerkship, and you have the whole entire clerkship to study this much information. So homework pretty much is like self-paced, and you like how much you can like cram into your head every single day after an exhausting day at the hospital. But there are some, like stupid little administrative tasks that you have to do as well. But not much. It's better than undergrad.
For our personal pre-clerkship, it really just depended on the unit. Like for whatchamacallit, like histology, sometimes they were like, you had to identify slides and then turn that in. And that honestly kind of brings me to a good point, is that like a lot of times each unit can be very different. And so I feel like if 2020, has taught us anything, is to be adaptable and flexible. Such an important skill. And I felt in pre-clerkship, like each test was run by different teachers and was taught differently, and some had a study guide and some didn't. And so you had to constantly be on your toes, but that's more the first year or two.
All right. So we're going to try to end at 8:30. So if you guys want to keep sending in questions, go ahead. The next one is kind of loaded questions, but why did you guys choose to become a doctor? If you guys want to answer that.
I feel like, this question changes like every single, or the answer to this question changes like every single day, because I find something like new with whatever I'm doing at that time that like convinces me even more that yes, this is like what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Like definitely. But for the most part, like after going through the whole experience of medical school, number one, I like being in charge. I like making most of the decisions, and I like having a team to work with, where I sort of help steer that team in the right direction. But at the same time, I also love that relationship that you develop with a patient, which is, I feel like in my opinion, is one of the most intimate relationships like in that you have with anyone, any other human being possible. Like this person literally has your health in their hands. Like every single decision that this person makes regarding your health, like it potentially could save your life. So I really love that like relationship between the doctor and the patient. And also I am a people person. So, I really love that interaction that I get. And I feel like medicine, along with my love of science, like it's like the good sort of mixture of all these like characteristics. And I feel like being a doctor is like the only thing left for me to do.
To go off of what you said, Navina, it does change quite often. I'm sure even more as you go into your rotations and you start getting more of these experiences. But I think when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do or devote my life to, I realized how much of a privilege it is to be in medicine, and to have that responsibility of care over someone's life. And so that just amazed me. But I think as of late, what I really like about medicine is like you get to spend all these years mastering your craft, and it's like something that you're really, really good at. Like my dad is a tailor, so that's his craft. That's what he spends his whole life doing, and he's the best at it, So finding a career that you can not only see yourself doing for the rest of your life, but also that to give you that personal fulfillment is so important. And I think that's part of my elevator pitch on this question.
For me personally, I feel like I went into medicine for a lot of things that I don't like about medicine, which makes it really hard when you have to push through a lot of really hard stuff. For me personally, the inequalities that are just constantly seen, especially amongst different races, I just got really or adverse childhood experiences, social determinants of health, these things are so relevant and play a role in like every single health situation. And I just felt like there's so much more potential to work with, again, public health and policies and how we can bring that together. And again, just a lot of, building bridges between different specialties. And I felt, obviously, just being a huge science nerd, obviously that can't be your only reason, because there's a lot of other things you can like about it, but also for me, just the fascination with the human body, like the fact that as your body is trying to cure you, it can also create a different problem. Like that's beautiful in like the most awful way ever. And so that majesticness of the human body in and of itself, just I constantly am in awe by, and I hope I don't ever lose that by going through this process, which maybe I will. But kind of like other people said, being a leader and working with patients, being able to work with people when they're literally at their most vulnerable, like someone else said, like that is such a privilege. That's such a privilege. And there's so much beauty and pain in that. And wanting to be a source of comfort, of answers to someone is just a phenomenal feeling.
Yeah, definitely very similar to what other people have said. I enjoy learning and I enjoy teaching, and those are some things that I really want to continue doing, throughout my career. And then even beyond that, I find serving others really fulfilling, and so a career in which I can combine all of those things, ended up working out that way. So yeah, and then just to add on to that a little bit more, it wasn't like a specific moment necessarily that I chose that I wanted to do medicine. I think it was just like kind of building up, taking science classes in high school and then in undergrad, and then volunteering and different experiences that exposed me to medicine. I think all of those kind of led me down this path. And then I think that there's still you have a lot of opportunities of different things that you can do. It's not like medicine just one thing or one career. I think you can always branch out and do different things within medicine. Like you can focus on public health or business or many different aspects. And I think that's something that also appeals to me, is that even when you're in a career, you can still choose to change depending on how your interests change and what your focus is at the time.
All right. So as we wrap up, I want to ask two last questions that I want all of you guys to answer. The first question is, what are you proud of that you've accomplished so far in medical school, and where you are right now? And the second one is, what are you looking forward to for the rest of the med school or residency? And yeah, so anyone can start off.
I think one of the most things that I'm proud about, regarding my whole medical school experience, is that I've really embraced the fact that I'm going to be a lifelong learner. I'm never going to achieve that state of infinite knowledge, and I'm totally okay with that. I'm going to be learning new things every single day. When you leave undergrad and you're about to start medical school, you do have that sense of oh my gosh, these attendings, they know everything. I'm never going to reach there. You're always kind of afraid, but in reality, they don't. And no one really does know everything. And that's okay. That's 100% okay. But just reaching that state of comfort and no longer having all those questions, this imposter syndrome, how did I even make it this far? Do they even know how dumb I am? Actually, all these questions, after a certain point in medical school, you realize that everyone is a little struggle bus of their own. So that sort of comfort that you get, with that whole lifelong learning experience is something that I'm really proud of. I've learned to embrace it, and I'm happy about it.
And what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to expanding my expertise in medicine and possibly specializing. I mean, that's the plan for now. I'm also getting married in 2 months, so I'm also looking forward to that.
Congratulations. All right.
So kind of similarly, which I think is so cool that, I hate repeating answers, but at the same time, there's a lot of beauty in that. For me, what I'm most proud of is reframing my thoughts on like certain topics, because that just shows that you've learned so much that you're able to, but then you also show that you put your ego aside, you took away, the stubbornness to even allow yourself to be open to reforming your thoughts. And I think that is so important, because the more you just get exposure to, so for me personally, a lot of that has been stuff in like food insecurity and specifically weight stigma in healthcare, and how prevalent that is and how much that impacts patients on, from small to life-changing levels. And so for me personally, I went in very much gung-ho nutrition, but just realizing kind of like how you craft that conversation narrative can really impact people in different ways. And so again, it's funny how it's like not one specific thing, because at the end of the day as a student, like, yeah, you can make things where you're still learning, right? So I guess it makes sense that our answers would be involved with learning. And then moving forward, just as a second year, just getting more patient interaction and learning Spanish, because I kind of dropped the ball a little bit, but after my first elective and seeing so many patients speak Spanish, it just really hit me that I think that will really contribute to me personally and not feeling burnt out, because being able to talk on that level, which for the record, anyone listening, y'all, if you have a summer open or something like that and you plan to be like anywhere in Texas, especially, take the time to learn Spanish. It's never too late, and it's something that will just be relevant in every single way. Or if you did it during your gap year, interviewers completely understand that. It's a lot to take on, but it's completely worth it. And especially if you feel like you need some extracurriculars or something like that too, it's really a win-win.
One more thing I'd like to add, there's this app called Anki, which is a flashcard app for spaced repetition. I don't know if you know about it, but it saved my life in medical school. I know a lot of people have different opinions about it, but the earlier you get used to Anki, the better. Like, I wish I had known that before I started medical school, but it is a lifesaver app.
You guys have your answers?
I think something that definitely looking forward to is the clinical rotations. I think we've spent so long, learning about all the different disease processes and the physiology that's going behind it. But I think it's really something different when you walk in a room and someone actually has kind of something that you've spent so much time, reading about or, trying to understand, and then you can apply it in a way that's going to help someone. I think that's something that I really look forward to. And yeah.
I think on a smaller level, something that I look forward to being an osteopathic medical student is learning our OMM, and then being able to treat our classmates and actually see that it helps, and then being able to go home and treat your family and see that it helps. I think it's very affirmative that what you're learning is actually applicable and you can do it with your hands. And so just being able to have that ability and having that knowledge is something that I am so grateful for. And I'm pretty sure my parents are also very grateful for because of their back pain and their dysfunctions and so forth. But I think that's one of the things that makes me excited, and it gives me that affirmation every day that yes, what I'm learning, there's an end to it, and what I'm learning is actually going to help someone someday. And on a more personal level, something that I'm proud of that I've accomplished is I think even within the first year here at medical school, I think I've grown so much in humility and charity. And I'm so grateful for all the opportunities that med school has given me to practice those virtues and to grow in that way. Because like you said, Navina, we're not going to know everything, but being able to collaborate with peers and seeing them grow and seeing them improve is very personally fulfilling too. Like I know, so me and Amara used to serve as MD officers on the same year, on the same board. And so it was really exciting. So now being here and seeing where he is and seeing where I am, it's very great to see. And so also just seeing your peers and everyone that you hear about succeed as well is something that's really exciting to me.
I think for like the last question in the chat, any arbitrary advice is just to be kind to everyone, because everyone is probably going through some sort of stress in their life, and you never know how shitty that nurse's day was or how horrible your attending's day was, or it's just always the best and the safest option to be kind to everyone, because in medicine, we sort of like live off of the positivity that we get from the hospital, and it's not that much. So if you can make a difference in someone else's life for that day, it really does matter. And I'm not a very like cheesy person in general, but this is one thing that I've like really learned going through 4 years of medical school. So please do be kind to everyone.
Do you guys have any other advice for pre-meds?
Just don't be afraid to not fit in the mold. Be intentional, and make sure again that you have things to back up. But again, if you're not going to do research, like do something else that's impactful. Do something interesting. You don't always have to fit in what you think other people say, and sometimes you might stand out more. But again, you have to be able to articulate how that's helped you grow as a person, which is always going to correlate to you growing and learning as a future physician.
I guess final words of advice. Something that an orthosurgeon told me when I was 15 years old, and I still remember to this day, is that there are no limits to what you can do. And I remember sitting in your shoes, being pre-med and listening to all these medical students speak. I'm like, there's no way that's going to be me. But here I am. And, I guess I did something right. So just don't be overwhelmed by what everyone else is doing. And really focus on you and shaping the idea of the kind of physician and person that you want to be. And then also just keeping in mind that there's always someone above you and always someone that you can learn from. Like I know Navina, you're about to start your intern year, and like I admire you so much for that. So even I like feel that a little bit of what the pre-meds might be feeling now. But I think you can just accept that with grace and gratitude, and really just believe in yourself and know that the journey is long, but it's worth it, and that you're not alone.
My advice would be just prioritize your wellness. Sleep, diet, and exercise are things that are super important and will allow you to do so much more if you focus on those things. And find mentors that you can relate to, who understand what you're going through and who can support you throughout your path. And one funny piece of advice that one of my mentors gave me was deadlines are for dead people. So try to prioritize getting things done early. I know it's most applicable to like, your med school apps, but I think in general, it's a good thing to live by.
All right. One last thing I just realized is, so Navina was actually the person that introduced me to Mullen Doctors at the freshman work fair. So she was the first person that I saw in Mullen Doctors. I don't know if you remember, because it was a lot of freshmen.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that makes me like, you just made my day. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Of course. But yeah, so it's very heartwarming to see you reach the end of medical school, as well as the rest of you reach different stages of medical school. So thank you guys for joining us. Does anyone have anything else to say before we adjourn? And
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have one thing about Navina. I spoke with her in 2019 about trying to get into germ research. And if it wasn't because of her helping me, I wouldn't have been doing it now.
Oh my God.
I know.
Y'all gonna make me cry.
You don't remember me, but yeah.
Y'all are definitely gonna make me cry. That is so sweet of you.
I know, I have to share it.
Thank you.
All right, so some of the things, if you guys don't know, we did an Insta Live with Brooklyn and all about nutrition and medicine. So go check that out on Instagram, as well as her Instagram page. Go check out Naveen's photography blog. I'm sure she would appreciate the support. And then, of course, thank you guys, all four of you, especially Amar and Kimberly, that I've always got the chance to know personally as the officers. Amar, I have to thank a lot, because he's the one who introduced me to a lot of things like Simon Sinek, leadership. So I would not be the leader I am today without Amar. And like, I really owe a lot to him. And Kimberly especially has been a great friend to me. And we always have the best time. We played League, I think me, Amar, and Kimberly. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, thank you guys. And thank you all the members for coming and listening to us. All right. And yes, we will post their emails if you guys are interested. Just reach out to us. But yeah, thank you guys and have a great night.